So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and as promised this is going to be the scenario from the Mech Discord, which was sent to me and I believe also made by Darkwolf44, so big thank you to him and all of the Mech players for playing in this battle today. And this was on a pre-existing map, so I believe this map is called the Old Forest Road. I think there is actually going to be another map of that name coming in 0.97, and I think all of these sort of maps that are sort of based around the Mirkwood area and sort of heavily forested will be part of an upcoming tug of war event, which will be on 0.97, sort of a little bit closer to release. When some of the new factions are done, there will be some tug of war events involving a few of them, I think. And in the theatre of war that is Mirkwood, of course, we will be seeing the elves of the Woodland Realm, Mirkwood, going up against the new orc faction in Dol Guldur, so you can look forward to that. But for the time being, this is a scenario. Any relevant rules, by the way, I will post in the description below, I think, because obviously that will give a fuller explanation than I am able to give here at the start. We will go through the army composition, so of course, and we'll start off, I think, over here, because we will have almost an immediate ambush going on along this part of the Old Forest Road, and we have Neo Danulko, who is going to be here at the front, who is leading this caravan, playing as Umbar. He's got his Naru Royal Guard here at the front, so their armies are laid out very much in the same manner that a sort of ambush battle in one of the newer Total Wars would be. So all of their units are in sort of a column formation, and then on either side, they weren't actually able to deploy, but the armies on either side here of this forested area were able to deploy. So it's going to be how quick these two armies here in the middle of the road can react. We've got Umbar, who have obviously got their Naru Royal Guard. Their general is going to be firing almost immediately, but he is pretty exposed. He could die early on if they're not careful. A very strong unit of pikes as well in the Naru Sentinels. They need to get into position pretty quickly, because otherwise they will be in danger of not being able to lay down their effectiveness, because obviously pikes, even a unit of good pikes like this, if they don't have their phalanx down and if they can't keep units at arm's length, they will die off pretty quickly, especially, well, there's only one pike that has multiple HP that can withstand a little bit of a beating when their phalanx is broken. The Naru Sentinels, however, not that. Then we have several units of Castamir's Legion, so this Umbar army is pretty strong, all things considered. And we will have a few units of them. So yeah, certainly this Umbar force that is leading the way is not a lightweight one. So the ambush is going to have to be pretty swift and pretty brutal if it's going to bring down the Umbar army as quickly as they would surely want to. And then moving back here, we also have a couple of units of the Abrazani Narduzagar. So of course these heavy swordsmen are going to have a little bit more skill than stuff like even the Castamir's Legion, I think. But obviously, they trade that in lack of a shield, so a little bit less in terms of survivability. But even so, the added skill can certainly help when you're having to cut your way through more lowly troops like the ambushers could have. And then back here we also have some archers, so a couple of units of the Abrazanim and Nadu Bawib. It is worth saying that this is on 0.96, of course. But the Nadu Bawib are one of those sort of more heavily armoured archers that can actually still be worth it, because they're good in a skirmish fight, and also they make pretty good makeshift line infantry if they have to pull out their blades in melee. And back here, yeah, certainly most of Umbar's sort of stronger forces are here. This is not the sort of army that you'd be able to bring all of these units in without a scenario being the framing for the battle. Because we've also got some Abrazani Nadu Tariq as well, so obviously Macemen, not particularly skillful. However, they are good line infantry because, of course, they're Macemen, so they've got that AP, which can really help against certain foes. And then back here we also have a couple of units also of the Numenorian Shield Guard, so yeah, definitely a very strong Umbar force here in the middle of the road. You'll also notice that there's going to be a lot of pop-in on this map with the vegetation. There's nothing I can do about that. The vegetation quality is on maximum, but there's so many trees that unfortunately it is going to be fairly obvious when the pop-in takes place. But there is nothing I can do about that, short of getting a mod which removes that. But I feel as though that could have some adverse effects on how the game actually performs, considering how it already struggles with some of the stuff that Reforged adds. Then we have Darkwolf. Obviously, you sent me this. He's going to be playing as Gondor. So Gondor and Umbar joining forces here. I think this is actually there are several factions at work here, so it's not just a case of the good team all together. So you can see here that there's sort of red on the radar. I believe there's a team that's sort of holding the settlement. There's the team in the north as well. There's the ambushers, and then there's this team over here, the blue team. Darkwolf44 playing as Gondor, so the southern Numenorians are going to be banding together, even though they truly hate one another. We have the Gandalf's Retinue Bodyguard here at the front, obviously. As far as multiple HP Lancers go, they're very good because they're very, very tough to kill. Big shield value, lots of armour, and overall, they will still net you a lot of damage, but they are not knights. It's worth bearing that in mind. Against other units of knights, they will fall away pretty quickly. Then back here we have a couple of units of the Care Andros Swordmasters. Obviously, again, these heavy swordsmen, better than the Abrazani Nadu Tariq, but also more expensive. Very nice armour, of course, as many Gondorian troops tend to have. A couple of units of the fully upgraded Gondor archers, who are already getting into a position where they can shoot. Some units here of the fully upgraded Gondor infantry. Very, very tough and tanky. Not as strong as the Castamir's Legion, even when they have all of their upgrades. But having said that, they're also, even with the upgrades, substantially cheaper than the Castamir's Legion. And we've got a lot of them, actually. An awful lot of them, actually. The full complement, really, of all the Gondor infantry. And then in addition to that, we've also got some fully upgraded Gondor Spearmen. So again, a little bit of extra mass on these guys, but obviously not quite as good at killing off enemy infantry. So certainly the Gondorian army is not quite as strong. Mostly infantry and spearmen with a few units of heavy swordsmen and some lancers. Then at the back, we've also got some Ramasek or garrison. But overall, still a fairly substantial army here that the ambushers are going to have to act quickly to kill off. So let's have a look at the southern ambushing army, which is going to be Eclipse. In fact, Eclipse, I think, might be the only army that's here. Yes, indeed. So Eclipse is going to be playing as the ambushers. He is going to be playing as Isengard. He's got some Uruk-hai raiders and some Uruk-hai pikemen, as well as some Uruk-hai archers. I would imagine here that the play is going to be for Eclipse to just try and damage this army as much as he possibly can. He's not going to be expected to win this, but he can certainly catch them off guard if he moves quickly enough. Obviously, they know he's coming, but they can't possibly cover every angle if Isengard move quickly. So a lot of Uruk-hai raiders, a lot of Uruk-hai pikemen. There's the possibility of a lot of units still hiding as well. Over here we can see some Uruk-hai archers who are also already firing. Obviously not the finest archers, but even so, in the trees they may be difficult to get at. We'll see. We've also got some more Uruk-hai raiders. I imagine it's going to be a similar story here. Raiders combined with pikemen, and indeed it is. Back here we do, however, have the Isengard General in the Guards of Orthanc, a very, very tough and tanky bodyguard spearman. And then the only other unit we can see thus far is a unit which has revealed itself over here, which is a unit of standard Uruk-hai infantry. So Isengard are going to have to try and take down this very nasty looking column of Umbar and Gondorian infantry. The holders of the settlement, however, we have our Dale. So Dollar Elf is going to be playing as Dale, and I believe it's Cardolan who are helping them out. So the Northmen and the Middlemen are both going to be trying to hold the Old Forest Roads settlement from any who would try and take it. And some Lake Town Spearmen are here at the front, as well as some more Lake Town Spearmen and some Lake Town Bowmen as well. Now, I'm sure what Dale are hoping for, based on the army that they have, is that Isengard are able to do the business for them a little bit out in the ambush and cut down on what Gondor and Umbar have, because it's a scary infantry force that they have. And these Lake Town units are certainly not going to be a match for most of what they have brought to the field today. They do have some stronger units here at the back, however, including their General's Bodyguard, which is the Dalian Royal Guard. Very good at melee, very tough at range as well. And of course, the Girian's Paladins, which with their AP, 1-to-1, they could probably take on anything that Umbar and Gondor have brought, but it probably won't be 1-to-1 unless that Isengard ambush is particularly well executed. There's a lot of pikemen over here, which again are probably going to be hoping for not too much in the way of ammunition left over at the end. There is this little road which sort of comes out over here, but based on the fact that the red line is right here, they don't have to worry about this particular road being attacked. So these 2 units of Lake Town infantry, 3 units of Lake Town infantry in fact, can be moved to where they are needed most. But other than that, I think we also have a couple of units of Lake Town infantry and bowmen over here. But for the most part, you can certainly see here that this Dalian force is fairly thin on the ground in terms of quality. It's mostly Lake Town units, so they're certainly going to be hoping that there's a lot of damage done to all of the enemy armies that are coming forward before they have to engage, because Lake Town units alone is not going to be enough to win them the day. However, they do have Cardolan to help them out, which is going to be played by Lord of Belagos. At least I'm almost certain Cardolan are, based on the deployment zones that Cardolan are helping them out. Now, Greenwatch Garrison footmen, good pikemen, cheap pikemen alongside Lake Town pikes. The spearmen, of course, not great in melee, which I imagine Cardolan are probably going to have a slightly stronger force than Dale overall, because they do have quite a lot of their Miniscarithlan units, which are stronger than the Lake Town units by virtue of their armour, even if their morale is still not particularly fantastic. They've also got the sharpshooters, so very good crossbows, of course, some Miniscarithlan swordsmen, and then a fairly substantial force here of more footmen, which is obviously the pikes. And then we also have the Wardens of Tyr and Gorthad. Very good, very useful. They almost, I would say, one of the most important Cardolan units. In fact, I would say that. Just because of the morale buffing capabilities they have, which Cardolan do need. Another unit which can buff the morale is the General's Bodyguard back here, the Hearthguard of Amon Sul. Obviously very similar to the Naran Royal Guard in terms of functionality. Then a couple more units of Greenwatch Garrison Spearmen. And over here there's yet more Cardolan forces, more Miniscarithlan units, archers, spearmen, and some more Greenwatch Garrison Spearmen as well. So fairly substantial actually overall presence on the field from Cardolan. Certainly in terms of quality, Cardland have more, just because they have primarily Miniscarithan units, which are stronger than the Lake Town units. But Cardland will have something else to worry about also, because they have to worry about a force coming from the north. And that is going to be the Realm of Linden, which is going to be played by Inarius. And I think that's it with regards to the army up here. But we all know how effective Linden can potentially be. And in particular against someone like Cardland, the Elven morale and also the Elven skill could really come in handy against those Miniscarithan units. Lots of 4 Linden pikes, which are going to need to steer clear of the Cardland skirmish line, to be fair. But if they are sort of held in reserve, they are obviously substantially stronger than the Greenwatch Garrison footmen and the Lake Town pikemen. The Harlington infantry over here as well. Very, very good line infantry. In terms of just pure quality, the Castamir's Legion will beat them out, but they're also more expensive. Pound for pound, I think the Harlington infantry are probably the most effective line infantry force in terms of melee prowess on the field today. There's more Harlington infantry down there as well. There's Harlington Guard, which obviously spear, archer, hybrids. The hybrid units are really what sets Linden apart from both the other elves and just about any faction, to be honest. Linden, very, very easy to build an effective army with. And back here we have more 4 Linden pikemen. The General's bodyguard is going to be the mighty... Actually, that's not. That's Mithlon's Swordmasters. Yes, here they are. I knew they were on the field somewhere. The mighty Noldorin Blade Masters, obviously very, very powerful heavy swordsmen, bodyguard tier. I think 1-to-1 they are actually the strongest two-handed sword unit in the game. You know, even stronger than the Haven Guard, even stronger than the upgraded Temple Executioners, and that comes down to their melee skill, because Linden's melee skill is so high. Of course, however, there's bound to be some hidden units in here. There could very well be Wardens of Elos Tyrion, there could be all manner of units hidden in the trees, which I'm simply not seeing. So a little bit of an extended look there, but then this is a rather complicated battle in many ways. So, which faction here is your money on? You know, we have the Southern Numenorians, we have the standard humans, the Northmen and the Middlemen, we have the Elves sweeping in from the north, and we have Isengard. I feel as though Isengard are the ones who honestly have got the hardest task. I don't really feel as though they're going to win today, because their job is really just to try and do as much damage as they possibly can to the Southern Numenorians as they sort of edge their way closer to the settlement. Dale have got an interesting task. It really does depend on how much damage Isengard can do, whether Dale are in a position to stop Umbar and Gondor. Cardland against Linden is also going to be an interesting one. I don't know, my money personally is going to be on the Southern Numenorians. They've got a lot of quality, even with that ambush they have to deal with early on, and certainly Isengard probably have their, I would put money on the fact they probably have Uruk-hai Berserkers and maybe even Naz-Kai hidden in the tree somewhere, maybe even Lurt's Hunting Pack. With units like that, they will still not win, but they'll be able to do a lot of damage, and then I still feel as though their strength, however, the Southern Numenorians is going to be too strong. I feel as though they'll punch through. The Lake Town units are just not going to be enough. I think Dale will probably crumble before the might of Umbar and Gondor. And Cardland and Linden could fight each other to a bit of a standstill based on the choke points and such, which might save Cardland from being just rolled over by Linden's quality. But we'll see. However, we will start off the battle over here because the ambush is going to get right underway, so let us begin. So, the frames are going to be interesting here, but you can already see that the Uruk-hai infantry are revealing themselves. The Uruk-hai infantry and actually some Champions of the White Hand, which were hidden as well. Now, Champions of the White Hand could do huge damage off the charge, and it does look as though they're actually going to charge right in here to the Abrazani Narduzagar. Not the best of charges, because the Uruk-hai infantry were also moving in there, but I think actually we should already turn things down to half speed, because we're going to be seeing a lot of action along here from Isengard, the Champions of the White Hand, and the Uruk-hai infantry charging right in to the Abrazani Narduzagar, and there's some Nardu Tariq in there as well. Now the Uruk-hai infantry, they're in too thin of a line to really punch through the Nardu Tariq. Of course, the Nardu Tariq with their AP can be very, very useful to punch through that Isengard armour. But we also have the Numenorian Shield Guard over here, who actually did not move in time, so they're actually in a little bit of trouble potentially. The Uruk-hai pikemen also closing in behind them. As you can see, Umbar being collapsed in on all sides here by the Isengard force. Nice, fast movement. The Nardu Bawi as well. I don't think the Nardu Bawi were going to have a choice really but to engage in melee, because Umbar simply cannot spare the men to actually help defend these archers. They're going to need to get into melee somewhere, I think. Now, fortunately for Umbar, they are good in melee. There are certainly an arch unit which can hold their own in melee, Narduzagar and Castamir's Legion, but once again we can see the Uruk-hai forces just pouring forwards. A brutal ambush, but still, Umbar's quality should be more than enough to see them through. However, those Uruk-hai crossbows getting into position, the Narun Aru Royal Guard have sort of peeled off a little bit. Honestly though, I would get these Narun Aru Royal Guard into melee, because if you start just trading blows, there are not enough Royal Guardsmen here to actually kill the crossbows quickly enough, and the crossbows, a lot of stopping power on those bad boys. There's more crossbows moving in as well. So certainly I would say, based on the quality of the troops over here, Isengard have actually focused a little bit on Umbar, and so far it would certainly appear that that has paid dividends, because the Umbar general, his corpse is right here, killed by the Uruk-hai infantry. Let's go and see what's happening, however, on the Gondorian front. Now, I would imagine over here there's going to be less in the way of Uruk-hai infantry and crossbows, I should say. And indeed it is. It's mostly raiders and archers down here, which Gondor will mulch their way through. Maybe not too quickly, because there are pikemen backing them up. But Gondor's victory down here is rather inevitable. You can also see the Gondor archers moving into position. The spearmen are going to start to wrap around, get into those Uruk-hai archers and start ripping them to pieces as well. There's really not much over on this side either, so whereas Umbar was sandwiched on both sides by Isengard's forces, Gondor have been able to sort of focus most of their attention on one side of the road, and their cavalry is actually going to be very important. I actually feel as though Gondor need to get their hustle on here and help Umbar a little bit, because Umbar's army could in the end take enough damage to the point where Dale could be able to dig in a little bit and make life a little bit more difficult. But I think actually we can go back up to 1 speed here. You can see the Gondor infantry with the armour upgrade. It says defeat seems certain, but that's only because of the numbers discrepancy, and that will start to even out, particularly with the armour upgrade. The Uruk-hai raiders are nowhere near as good as the Gondor infantry, and also more Gondor infantry is on the way. So yeah, the Isengard forces back here, getting mulched slowly but surely by Gondor. Meanwhile, Umbar's quality is having to pull them through here, and it will. But how much damage they take, it will make a difference when they come to have to try and assault that settlement. Because Dale can dig in with all those pikes, and if they don't have the range capabilities to try and force Dale's hand a little bit, it could get a little bit messy, particularly if Cardland decide to stack up stronger in the settlement rather than going after Linden. But you can certainly see here the quality of Umbar's infantry is very high. And even when Isengard focused a little bit more heavily on Umbar was still far too strong really over here. The guards of Orthanc are in here over as well. But again, the bodyguard spears are more designed for tanking damage more so than dishing it out. So they will get their killing done slowly, particularly against a unit of quality like the Castamir's Legion. But even so, good to see them over here. You can see here the Uruk-hai crossbows are shooting at the Narun Arur Guard. The champions of the White Hand are over there as well, but honestly, the Narun Arur Guard probably won't mind too much going up against champions of the White Hand, purely because they can pull out those spears. I'm surprised the champions of the White Hand have not been trying to charge into the rear of these Castamir's Legion units, to be honest with you. I'm also surprised the crossbows are not shooting directly into the Narun Aru Sentinels, which are probably going to start closing with them momentarily. But having said that, there's a lot going on all at once. Eclipse has got to essentially manage 2 portions of his army in a sort of a very long stretch of engagement here, so it is difficult to keep track of everything. And ultimately his armies were never going to win this. There's actually routing Nadubawid there. 39 of them, they might come back, they also might not. There's Uruk-hai raiders a little deeper into the forest. It looks as though they've actually been chased all the way back here by some Gondor infantry, but the Gondor infantry has chased them a little bit too far. It could be maybe a little bit of a multi-layered ambush over here. Eclipse trying to sort of pull some of his forces back, maybe lure some units deeper into the trees so he can start finishing them off, and this unit of Gondor infantry has chased them a little bit too far, I think. But having said that, I did see just through the trees over there more and more Gondorians on the way, the Gondor spearmen marching in. Gondor always look much better with their full plate armour, and they've been given a makeover for .97, as I'm sure many of you have seen, and it looks much better. Gondor looking as splendid as they should. Yeah, those Nadubawid may very well not come back, and any unit they can force off the field here, Isengard, is a bit of a victory. Meanwhile, I would imagine, we're seeing more and more Gondorians now start to link up with their Umbar allies. I'm seeing also and hearing the Gondorian horn as Gandalf and his retinue bodyguard charging through the trees here. They may very well be going after the crossbows, and indeed those crossbows are fighting in melee against the sentinels. So I can't imagine this is going to be too pretty for these crossbows. This will almost certainly be enough to rout them, in fact. The Gandalf retinue bodyguard have got a pretty heavy charge on them, and there they go, lances down. Yeah, that's going to carve right through them. Very, very nice indeed. The crossbows, of course, one of the most potent tools, and in the end I don't think they did as much damage as they could, the crossbows. Not really much point in going after the Narun Arur Guard, especially after you killed the general. You got lucky with the general snipe. You know, you don't need to go after the bodyguard after that anymore, I don't think. But we shall see if that pays any dividends later on for a faction that isn't Isengard. The Guards of Orthanc are being just utterly surrounded and overwhelmed now by the Casimir's Legion. More Umbar forces are on the way, as well as more Gondorians. But as we have a look over here, primarily it's dead Uruk-hai, but there are a fair few Umbar corpses sort of littered in there as well. So Gondor are definitely going to be in slightly better condition after Isengard decided to focus their attention on Umbar. We'll see how that affects the fight, because I feel as though if Isengard decided to stack up more heavily on Gondor, they probably would have done more damage overall, but they would have left a few more units of quality on this team. Here we can see the Uruk-hai pikemen, who are kind of all over the place a little bit at this point. Their formation is kind of buckling. The Númenorian Shield Guard are coming to the aid of the Gondor infantry and spears. There's some fire arrows actually being loosed through the trees. The Uruk-hai archers trying to do what damage they can. The Ramasekor garrison doing the business in melee as well. As far as militia goes, the fact that they're swordsmen means that they can do just that little bit more damage. Of similar sort of quality to the Uruk-hai raiders, I would imagine, actually, now I come to think of it. Gondor archers are moving through, as well as more Gondor spearmen. And I think, yeah, the Gandalf's retinue bodyguard is back here now as well. They're going to be sort of cycle charging in and out of the Uruk-hai archers. And already off one charge, there's a nice pile of corpses there, although one of them getting stuck in and amongst the unit there. And pretty soon, the battle's perspective will shift a little bit. There are still the Guards of Orthanc who are trying to get as many kills as they possibly can. Saruman is over here, but Gandalf is going to be feeling his superiority as he rides around in his bodyguard unit on horseback, as Saruman's army has, as he dies, has most certainly crumbled away to almost nothing. And Umbar and Gondor will be free to resume their march on the forest settlement. Still Dinar and Aru Sentinels in pretty good health as well. The Gandalf's retinue bodyguard are cutting their way through what remains, well, some stragglers really from an Uruk-hai archer unit. I think there are some Nazkai back here actually, so they did have Nazkai and Champions of the White Hand. Overall, you could make the case for saying that Isengard maybe should have done a little bit more damage than they have ended up doing. But he would say it was always a losing proposition for Eclipse, and you can see here that I think he's trying to sort of retreat some of his men deeper into the forest and maybe catch out some of these units which are chasing. Maybe try and lure them in, or maybe just sort of sequestering some of his units away for the late game so he can swoop in and take an unlikely victory. The problem with doing such a thing, though, is the fact that Darkwolf is going to be hounding him with his retinue bodyguard, although he needs to be very careful. His general is right in the middle of the Nazkai, and that's the last place you want your general to be. Absolute monsters of dealing with heavily armoured units. Meanwhile, the last place the Isengard general wants to be is probably over here, as he dies. Good timing. A combination of Gondorians, the Casimir's Legion, and the Abrazanium units are finishing off the Guards of Orthanc at this point. So, there is the Gandalf's retinue bodyguard as well, so probably what's going to happen now is the fairly long process for Umbar and Gondor sort of regrouping their army and then beginning their march on the town. These Uruk-hai raiders are shaken. Caer Andros Swordmasters. Few unit models lost, I suppose. A few Gondorians dead over here, but you can certainly see a few engagements for Gondor back here, but most of Isengard's force was focused over here. So having a look here in the north, let's see, as Cardland sort of starting to set the table for Linden. They're getting their archers and their crossbows into position, so they're not saving their crossbows. They are going to just sort of send them right in against Linden. Minas Rithlin spearmen will hold the line, but overall against the elves with that spear malice, they're not going to get a lot of kills, and they are going to find themselves outmatched. If Cardland are going to do the business here, it is going to be primarily with their ranged units, you would imagine. The Hearthguard of Amon Sul are also moving forward. There's also a few units of pikes in reserve. Interesting. There's a few Cardland units also in reserve. Interesting to see actually that he's got almost all of his Greenwatch Garrison spearmen sort of in the second line of defence, sort of defending the town, while he sent this army out here to sort of try and blunt the fangs of Linden a little bit, because again, this is not his full army, so Cardland are almost certainly not going to win this engagement, but they can certainly do a lot of damage with their skirmishers here, and we shall see if Linden are going to be able to make the most of that. There's still some Guards of Orthanc over here. The red star denoting the General's bodyguard unit. There's still 3 of them running around. But yeah, they're going to die. Excuse me. The Gondor archers and the Abrazanim still have ammunition as well. They still have sort of a decent unit size. So that's bad news for Dale ultimately, with a lot of their army being Lake Town pikemen and sort of more lightly armoured Lake Town units in general. It's going to be bad tidings, although Umbar are sort of wasting their ammunition on fleeing Isengard units, so maybe not the end of the world. Through the trees here, do Isengard still have units left? They do. These units are not routing, so they do have an army left alive, including Nazkai, and they're going to sort of sequester themselves in this corner of the map near this gorge, potentially. As Umbar and Gondor move through here and start to attack the settlement potentially through this way, Isengard can give Dale a bit of a hand, or they will wait for Dale to be completely gone and try to claim the settlement for themselves. So Isengard not completely out of this yet. It's still exceedingly unlikely that they manage to win with a very token force at this point. Uruk-hai pikemen, Nazkai, and I think that's actually it. Just 2 units to their name. But it is a pretty nasty defensive position as well that Dale have got over here. They've got the Dalian Royal Guard, they've got the Lake Town Bowmen, and it is a choke point that Umbar and Gondor are going to have to get through quickly. I think they're going to have to come forward in force very, very early on. Meanwhile, the northern engagement is beginning between Cardlan and Lyndon, and I think Lord of Balagost has already bitten off a little bit more than he can chew by sending his archers far too far forwards. The crossbows are going to start reloading, however. They could do a lot of damage here to this Harland infantry. Again, the AP is not going to be overly useful against Lyndon, but crossbows have got such good stopping power. They can do a lot of damage very, very quickly to units that are directly in front of them. And you can see here, last samurai-esque style volleys into these Harland infantry. And that's what this force of Cardlan is going to be trying to accomplish here. They are going to be out here and they are going to be trying. And there's another volley going in there. Oof. It's a lot of dead elves very, very quickly. But he's continuing to move forward. He's going right for the crossbows, but I just don't think he's going to have enough men left. He's already shaken. And also some spearmen are on the way. The sharpshooters won't roll over in melee either. They are designed to go up against armoured troops in melee more than anything. But even if they do get caught, they will at least be able to stand up for themselves. These elven units are already taking a fairly hefty chunk of damage. Lyndon are moving forwards, however. The 4 Lyndon pikemen, however, are taking arrow fire as well. So despite some initial squiffiness, shall we call it, on the part of Balagos with his front line, he has sort of salvaged the situation a little bit, and he's now able to use his ranged units in the way that he wants. You can see over here as well the Miniscarithan spearmen getting into a tight formation to go up against the 4 Lyndon pikes. The spearmen still won't win this engagement. They need to sort of push in more deeply if they're going to try and crack the phalanx. But they will at least hold those pikes in position for a little bit more time. The Mithril Swordmasters are on the way over those, so that's bad news. Bad news bears for Cardlan. There's a couple more units of 4 Lyndon pikes, but more volleys coming in here. Noldorin Guard on the way forward as well, so this is a strong Lyndon force. Here come the Miniscarithan sharpshooters, the Miniscarithan archers doing the business as well. Inarius maybe getting a little bit greedy, maybe stretching his advance a little bit too much. He is managing to get surrounds on these units of Cardlan forces. And Cardlan's low morale is going to come into play here, you would imagine, because they're already wavering. He has got a very nice blob, however, that he can shoot into the Hearthguard of Amon Sul. But I feel as though Lyndon, again, it's been an interesting. Neither the advance nor the defence has been ideal, but Lyndon certainly have had the better of this so far. I feel as though, again, with Mithlon Swordmasters charging in, Cardlan already being forced back, so not the best of defences really so far. And Cardlan needed to be the anchor to this defence, because Dale have got far too many low-tier Lake Town units to be the defenders all on their lonesome. But too many Miniscarithan units have been thrown under the bus here. You can see over here the crossbows have taken a little bit of damage as well. Presumably that's from Harland Guard, which are in position now. And now the sharpshooters are also going to have to go up against Mithlon Swordmasters in melee, which is just not a fight that they can hope to do very well in. They are getting some support from their fellows over there, though, and they get a point-blank volley. So maybe with all those casualties they can do the business in melee, but it's going to be a risky one. Cardlan has a choice to make now. Will he reinforce or will he pull back? And it looks as though he's going to reinforce, because he's sending forward more of his Greenwatch Garrison spearmen, so this is going to put the onus on Dale to try and hold the settlement. Here we can see some Greenwatch Garrison footmen trying to get into position to hold these smaller choke points, but just as the Lyndon pikemen were being targeted by the Cardlan archers, the Cardlan pikes are being targeted by the Lyndon archers. And needless to say, Greenwatch Garrison footmen will not do very well against the accurate elven arrow fire from the Harlingen Guard. Harlingen infantry also waiting for their moment to get in there as well. There is more footmen waiting within the encampment. You can see, yeah, you know, Cardland, you can never really rely on them to sort of clump up and sort of fight a losing battle for too long because of their low morale. Or lower morale on average. They still have better morale than most of the orcs will be able to manage, for example. Miniskirithnan sharpshooters firing their crossbows in, but they're having to arc their shots a little bit at this point. The Harlingen infantry charging forwards now as well. Point blank volleys again coming in from the sharpshooters, but the sharpshooters I think could have been the MVPs of the defence here for the settlement, but unfortunately they haven't really. They've got some good kills, don't get me wrong, but I feel as though this defence just wasn't all that well constructed when you really look at it. There were just too many gaps. Linden came forward, not as aggressively as I personally would have liked, but they still came forward in numbers with some aggression, and the gaps were miles wide in that defence, and Linden were able to easily exploit them, really. And Cardland is sending forward reinforcements now, but I think it's a little bit too late. And it is only Greenwatch Garrison spearmen, which Linden units are going to have absolutely no issues whatsoever at cleaving their way through very basic units of spears like this. Bad tidings for the Cardland defence indeed. None of the elites have really been committed forward yet. You can see over here actually that this unit of Miniskirithnan spearmen, well, they're broken and fighting to the death, but they must have been standing and fighting for quite some time. Mithlon Swordmasters have been committed, I suppose. Some Harlan and Guard moving forward. No Javelins actually I can see from Linden, which is a rarity. There's some Skiltrom action as well. Archers trying to sort of fire in there, and they're going after the right targets, to be fair, Balagost. If he had maybe sort of positioned his front line over here, rather than trying to sort of go out into more open ground, his defence probably would have fared much better than it has. Because he is certainly going after the right units, going after pikes, going after Mithlon Swordmasters, and there are some routing units as well. And to be fair, those crossbows starting to rack up a bit of a kill count on them. This unit of crossbows over here, however, is on the verge of their demise. These poor mace men. Here come the Harlan Guard. I think they're out of ammunition at this point, actually, the Miniskirithnan sharpshooters. Indeed they are. They pulled out their maces. So they're going to charge in against the Harlan Guard again. Spearmen against macemen, and the maces are not really going to be too effective here against the lightly armoured units, so not an ideal engagement for either, but I think Linden will just be grateful that there's no more crossbow bolts. Here we can see the Greenwatch Garrison spearmen. Balance of forces is evenly matched. I'm not so sure I agree with that. The Mithlon Swordmasters still taking a bit of a beating, however, from the Miniskirithnan archers. The Hearthguard of Amon Sul are coming back. More Fallen pikes and Mithlon pikes are being pushed forward, however. Harlan Guard trying to get some shots off. Again, killing off more of these pikes. Greenwatch Garrison spearmen heading through the encampment, and they're going to try and, I think, get into those banks of archers, but as soon as they move forward, they're going to be pounced on by all sorts of nasty units. Let's have a look at what's going on over here, though, on the road. So Gondor and Umbar have formed up a little bit more. They're getting ready to begin their assault on the settlement. They could, of course, take this road around and start heading in a different direction, although that would also put them potentially at the mercy of Linden as they move forward. We shall see. And I think actually this is a bit of an edit that Dark Wolf has made, because you can tell that this, I think, was designed to be a road into the settlement, but it is now a cliff. Interesting indeed. But there are still these bridges which can be used. Well, I've never really liked using bridges in Med 2. Meanwhile, back to the engagement, and once again these Greenwatch Garrison spearmen are charging forward, trying to engage with the archers, but unfortunately for them they are going to be engaged by the Forlinden pikemen almost immediately, as well as Harlan infantry and Mithlon Swordmasters, so there's scarcely been a more one-sided fight in Reforged since it started. These Cardland militiamen are going to be absolutely slaughtered en masse. They are, however, absorbing some arrow fire, which Belagos will be happy with, because that's pretty much what they're best at. Good shield value on them, and obviously they're very cheap. These Greenwatch Garrison footmen are sort of trying to reposition themselves. It'll be interesting to see what he does, because there's a lot of roads through this encampment. There's not really... He can't just sort of bottle Linden up as much as he would like, I'm sure. But you can see here that Lyndon's starting to make some real ground. It says victory seems certain for the Miniscarithan sharpshooters, and I feel as though that's a result of the range support they're getting from the archers. Again, going after the pikes and the heavy swordsmen, which is exactly the right thing to do from Valadost. So far, so good. There's an awful lot of dead Cardinal forces over here, and Lyndon will be victorious in the long run, which is going to leave Dale sandwiched between a rock and a hard place. Defeat seems certain for the Cardinal forces. You can see here that they're about to get surrounded as well, so that they could break before they even get there, to be honest. They are wavering, and I think this is going to be the retreat. You can see Cardinal are now retreating some of their forces, including the Hearthguard. I think as well the Wardens of Tirn Gorthad are down there, so they're going to be able to retreat into the settlement. But overall, I think Lyndon can afford to be pretty pleased with how the outer engagement went. Could have gone better, of course. They lost quite a few to the crossbows and archers, but it could have been much, much worse as well. And all Lyndon really need to do is just sort of bide their time and wait for Umbar and Gondor to make their play on the settlement, maybe wear the defenders down a little bit, and then they can move in themselves. The Harland and Guard also moving around. Still have ammunition as well, which is worrying, particularly from a Dale standpoint, to see all of these attacking factions that still have their ammunition. Their Lake Town units are not going to enjoy being under sustained arrow fire in that siege. Interestingly enough, the morale of these Greenwatch Garrison spearmen only increased when they were surrounded. Real unsung heroes of the Cardinal line. We've seen them hold longer for the most part than Miniscarithan units, which is interesting. But they certainly won't. I would be surprised if they got a single kill in this situation. Sandwiched between all of these Lyndon pikes, the Lyndon heavy swordsmen and line infantry also putting pressure on them. Oof, yeah. Stabbed, and then I'm sure that would have been a beheading. And now they're routing, so that's going to be the end of them. There's no escape for them either, so they'll probably fight to the death. But Lyndon have taken this outer defence. They've taken the first encampment, and they will also take the second for the most part without any sort of resistance. The Miniscarithan archers might shoot them a little bit, but the outer defence is now gone. Which Cardland is still going to be over here with all of their forces trying to stop Lyndon, it would seem. Also with a little bit of help from Dale. There's a lot of swordsmen over here, which will do slightly better than the spears. The Lake Town units, again, are not really ideal for going against Lyndon's forces with. The Wardens of Tirn Gorthad will maybe keep the morale in check for a little bit longer than we've seen thus far. But Dolorelf still has these reserves in place as well. But I think the time has come to make a little cut, actually. Because I can't imagine... Or maybe not. Maybe we will hold fire, because Cardland still have some units a little bit further out, although I think Lyndon is going to take their time. So yeah, I will make a little cut here as the attackers decide how they want to handle this, because obviously the defenders are in place, and I think the onus, to be honest, is on Umbar and Gondor to move forward first, but we'll see. So we do have the beginnings of a skirmish fight, so not as big a cut as I was thinking I was going to make, but you can see here that certainly from a Gondorian perspective, this is exactly what you want to be happening. Now, if this is how the majority of this next section of the fight is going to go, I will make a cut at some point as well. Purely because just filtering in one archer at a time, waiting for Dale to run out of ammunition and then moving forward is not going to make for the most entertaining viewing. But for the time being, it is worth sort of rejoining, because we can also see here that Dolorelf is starting to move forward with some Lake Town infantry to put some pressure on the Gondorians and maybe force them to send some infantry in to defend these archers. You can see as well that these Gondorian archers, even with both levels of armour upgrade, I'm actually very surprised that these two Castamir's Legion are moving forward. But even with the armour upgrades, those Dalian Royal Guard, they're up on the cliffs, much stronger archers, and also they're not really in an easy spot for the Gondor archers to return fire on. So you can see already that a few of the Gondorian archers have lost their lives. The Ramas Ekor garrison are also moving forward with some depleted Castamir's Legion and some more Gondor archers, actually. You can see the scale of the Umbar and Gondorian push forward. They're still moving in. The Isengard forces are still sequestered away down in the woods, it's worth saying. But yeah, the Lake Town infantry are actually pulling back. So I think I will continue the cut that I was making previously, purely because no one really wants to sit here and watch as Gondor and Dale play tag with one of those archers, because it's the sort of thing which could last quite a while, and it's not really the most interesting thing to watch. And also Lyndon could also move in, but they're also sort of gathering their forces, maybe getting ready for a push on Cardland. Well, point blank, And once again, we have a little bit of a probing attack more than anything else, because I imagine these Ramazakul garrison are going to break long before, but I think, once again, this is just a ploy to get Dale to waste some of their ammunition, which they have fallen for a little bit, because they have used, I think they even used a volley from their Daily Royal Guard, which is a heresy on a unit as low tier as this, when really the Lake Town units would have been just fine. In the numbers that the Lake Town units are in, particularly seeing as this Gondorian unit has come forward without any support, their morale was always likely to fall apart. The announcer doesn't fancy Umbar and Gondor's chances. Now the Casimir's Legion are a little bit more worth going after, but to use Lake Town River Patrol again, they may be low tier Javies, but they really should be using them on a unit that's in slightly better condition than this, even though this unit of Casimir's Legion is largely gone at this point. It's a lot of wasted projectiles, which they can scarcely afford at this point. You know, Dale are going to need to use all of the resources at their disposal to try and hold on to the settlement at this point. Considering most of their force is made up of Lake Town units, and there go the Ramazakul garrison. They may be back. Meanwhile, we do have the beginnings of an engagement in this encampment as well, between Cardolan and Linden once again. And once again, the quality is going to prove to be the problem here, I think, for Cardolan. Most of their infantry that's left is Greenwatch Garrison spearmen, and they're being tasked with going up against Mithlon Swordmasters, which is just, it's never going to go well for them. These heavy elven swordsmen are just going to be able to carve and cleave their way through these low-tier Cardolan spears. The Noldorin Blade Masters are moving forward as well now, as well as the Noldorin Guard, so yeah, this is going to be the end of these units over here. There is actually not an engagement happening over there, but down here on the road there is. You can see this unit of Miniscarithan archers which were sent forward. Presumably they're out of ammunition, and they will actually win over here, I think, if the engagement is allowed to last long enough, because reinforcements may be on the way, and that will of course finish this unit from Cardolan off. Which again, Linden can afford to be pretty pleased with how this engagement is going so far. These archers are in position at this point, however, which is a pretty nice shot they've got as well. Mithlon Swordmasters, potentially the Noldorin Guard. The hit points will save the Noldorin Guard, of course, from any lasting damage. Or Noldorin Blade Masters, I should say. The Noldorin Guard, their armour will certainly help them. Here you can see that projectiles are coming in. The Mithlon Swordmasters certainly the most vulnerable units, but I don't think the Cardolan infantry is going to stick around for too much longer, if I'm being honest. There's more units also heading around the limits of the map, the Mithlon Pikemen and the Noldorin Guard heading around here. Presumably they're going to try and go after the Miniscarithan archers again. A last samurai-esque charge from the Mithlon Swordmasters. Again, they will take losses from doing this. This is Linden's primary weakness. When they're exposed in such a way, their lack of armour is a real problem. Is this unit of archers going to be able to get away? Maybe. I mean, they're winded. The Hearthguard are over there as well. Maybe they're going to get some covering fire. Yeah, there's some more routing from the Cardolan forces. So Cardolan tried to put up a fight for this second encampment, but ultimately it went much the same way that the first defence went. Linden's quality just far too much for these Cardolan units. And again, for the first defence, at the very least, they had some range support. Here, they only really had one unit of archers that was sort of poking away at a single unit of Mithlon Swordmasters. That's going to be the end of that. Meanwhile, down here, we can see the Isengard forces have been revealed. The Uruk-hai archers, the Uruk-hai crossbows, the Nazkai. What happened to that unit of pikes as well? Because you can see here, I think, Umbar and Gondor have decided that they really don't want these forces sort of hitting them in the back, because both of them are sending forces forward. The Abrazani Nadubawi and Isengard are sort of squashed right up against the limits of the map at this point, and once again they're going to run away into the forest. There's the Uruk-hai pikemen. So 4 units they've got left, actually, Isengard, but they're going to run into the trees again. Gondor do have cav, but they won't want to send them in, because with crossbows and pikes, they could lose their general to that, and that is the last thing they're going to want. I think Umbar and Gondor are just going to have to accept the fact that Isengard are going to attack them in the rear at some point, whether they like it or not, because sending forward these individual units into the forest to try and sort of root them out is all well and good, but I feel as though their archers would probably be better served trying to poke and prod at this defensive line over here. Well, Lake Town bowmen are up here on the side now, and you can see that there is a little bit more of a genuine attack going on. Gondor infantry taking some damage from the Lake Town bowmen. The Gondor archers in the background over there trying to do their own damage. The Lake Town River Patrol are just in behind. They pulled out their blades, so they must have used all their javies. Here comes the Gondor infantry, and I think it's just a singular unit of Gondor infantry actually. But the Lake Town spearmen should be able to hold them in place actually long enough for the archers to do the damage. The Gondor infantry with their armour and shields may very well be ideally suited for absorbing arrow fire, but there's such a high volume of it coming in. The Lake Town Spears should be just enough. The River Patrol also getting in there as well. Let's see what's going on over on this side. And yeah, Linden thoroughly victorious. There's actually still a fight going on over here. The Miniscarithan Archers trying to be the heroes their team needs, but unfortunately they lose their nerve. So yeah, Linden have occupied this encampment at this point, and now I would say from a Linden perspective, they have taken losses to get this far. I would say for them, it's probably worthwhile waiting, because if you attack the settlement now, you probably will be able to make some decent progress, but you'll be hurting the defenders, the current owners of the settlement in Cardland and Dale more so, and then... Thank you, announcer. The strength of Gondor and Umbar will then be too much for you, because after that point you really will be sort of running on fumes, so you kind of need to let Dale do as much damage to this Gondorian and Umbar push as you possibly can. Possibly as well, Isengard have still got a part to play with the Uruk-hai crossbows and the Uruk-hai archers opening up on the advancing Abrazani Nadi Bawib. Through the trees it's a little bit difficult to see what is actually going on. You can see the Abrazanim, I think, at this point not really fancying this fight too much. The Naharu Royal Guard are also running. The Ramasek or Garrison Archers, of course, is still routing. And I think now they're going to sort of reform their armies. And Umbar are going to go around, it looks like. Which will actually put them in a... it looks like they've stopped, actually. That's a bit of a shame. Because that would have put them in direct conflict with Linden. Which would have meant we would have a three-way battle in every sense of the word, rather than just the defenders here getting spit roasted as the Lake Town units try to hold the line against their more elite, more professional Gondorian brethren. As the Gondor infantry slowly but surely hacking and slashing their way through without any sort of range support. This is what the Gondor infantry are going to do to Lake Town units. It's exactly the sort of unit they're going to enjoy facing. And I think that the Dalian player is falling into the trap somewhat of trying to skirmish with Gondor, which is exactly what Darkwolf wants. Gondor archers are pretty much built for this, especially with both levels of armour upgrade. They can skirmish for a relatively long time, and while they may be more expensive than the Lake Town bowmen, this is the sort of thing the Gondorians can afford to do at this point. You can see over here there is a unit of Lake Town pikemen coming down here, which may be enough to sort of halt the Gondorian progress a little bit, but with range support again, the Lake Town pikemen are a very juicy target for any archers. We are actually just past the halfway point. Of course we can't actually see the percentages because there's more than two factions or two teams here at work. But so far I would be feeling pretty happy if I were the Gondor and Umbar team, so I think my prediction is looking pretty good. Linden are also in a fairly decent position. If Dale can sort of get their act together and do some damage to Gondor and Umbar, Linden could swoop in and win this. There's always the wild card of Isengard. The Lake Town bowmen are just sort of biding their time. At the very least, they're not unthinkingly using their ammunition anymore, Dale. But I'm not so sure. I mean, the Lake Town pikemen are now in position. Their phalanx down, which should be enough to halt the Gondorian progress. But you can see their fire arrows coming in. The Lake Town units are not exactly the finest in terms of their morale. So Darkwolf certainly knows what he's doing there. For any bodyguard. I think one of the Isengard units actually can hide, and that may very well be the Nazkai. Can't actually see them. Weird. Anyway, back to the action. As we have pretty much the polar opposite to what Gondor were having to deal with early on, a very quick, fast and brutal ambush on all sides. Now it's a choke point battle, which honestly is the sort of battle which Gondor can engage in and be quite comfortable in. Victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle, and that goes to show how superior the Gondor forces are to the Lake Town units. More forces are having to be committed. Another unit of Lake Town spearmen coming down here. Some Nadi Bawib moving into position as well. Still the Dalian archers are waiting up on the cliff there. I think that's pretty much all of the River Patrol dead as well as the spears, so it's really just the Lake Town pikemen at this point, and they're taking a bit of a beating. So the reinforcements from the Lake Town spearmen really can't come soon enough. It is worth saying, of course, in point 97, the Lake Town bowmen and the Lake Town infantry will become a singular unit. Yeah, more arrow fire, and Darkwolf is targeting the pikes. He's a little bit too far away and the angle's not ideal, but he's still going after the pikes. Some of the Gondor infantry starting to rout, and now with the addition of those reinforcements, the numbers are starting to look a little bit more skewed in favour of Dale. So Gondor are going to need to send forward some reinforcements if they want to keep this assault going. And I think they're a little bit too far away. I mean, there's some Gondor spearmen moving forward, but I think the Gondor infantry is honestly going to rout before they get there. And again, it's very much a numbers game for Dale when you're reliant on Lake Town units. And the pikemen with the spearmen. Not a combination which is going to kill things all that quickly, but it will hold. And here comes the Lake Town bowmen, and they are shooting in to the on-rushing reinforcements. Again, it's only Gondor spears, but they will take some losses on the way forwards here. Meanwhile, you have a look over here. The assault is beginning on this side as well, so Lyndon, tired of waiting, and this I think plays most into the hands of Gondor and Umbar, to be honest, but Lyndon are coming in, and they are going to engage with the Cardland forces. The Minsker Rutland swordsmen, however, Harland and Guard, they are hybrid units and they're spears in melee, which does mean they're not going to be the best at dealing damage, and the Minsker Rutland swordsmen will actually do pretty well against Harland and Guard, but with the addition of pikes, particularly the Mithlon pikes, the more elite variant, Lyndon could very well start to do a fairly hefty amount of damage. Cardland are going to respond in kind, however, it looks like, with the Wardens of Tir and Gorthad, which will also keep those Cardland forces fighting for a little bit longer. There's a lot of Cardland infantry on the way forward. I think more damage dealers are required. So Harland and Guard are firing in. Certainly the right unit to go after would be the Wardens. They're shooting into the blob. At least they're hitting things. Here comes the Mithlon pikemen. Pretty much an all-out engagement over here, which will give Lyndon fairly direct access to the settlement if they're able to get through here. And over time, I imagine they will, but it's going to cost them pretty dearly. It's also going to cost the defenders pretty dearly on this side of the battle as well. Those Wardens of Tir and Gorthad will dig in, however, and they will stay there for quite some time. But now you can see Mithlon Swordmasters, Noldorin Blade Masters, and the Noldorin Guard coming forward as soon as they get into melee. It's not going to be good for the Minsker Rutland units or the Lake Town units. They're going to hate going up against units of that quality. The Hearthguard of Amon Sul are up here in a very nice position, though, and doubtless they are going to be targeting the Mithlon pikemen. Definitely the best target for them to go after. A lot of good kills there. The Girians, Paladins, biding their time also. While over on this side, the other choke point fight is still ongoing. The Gondor Spearmen did get into melee, but once again, there's just a wall of Lake Town units in the way. Certainly a battle of attrition that Gondor are having to engage in over here, as arrows continue to fly, albeit from very depleted units at this point. Slowly but surely, Gondor's ranged payloads may very well start to thin out a little bit, but then they can just fall back on the quality that Umbar have got in melee in this battle today, as the Gondorians. It's a thin Gondorian line compared to the Dalian one. They do have more direct reinforcements this time, albeit in a very depleted unit. Let's go and see what's happening over here. Very bright this map. I haven't changed my settings at all, so it must just be the weather settings. Very strange indeed. More Foreland and pikemen are there. You can see there the Hearthguard of Amon Sul just poking out over the hilltop. But so far, this very thick Cardland and Dalian defence has held firm against Lyndon. Just imagine what they could do if they still have one of those crossbows. We can see here they may be depleted, this unit of Mithlon Swordmasters. They are going to start to attack the side of the Lake Town Spearmen and the Minsker Rutland Swordsmen, and that's going to do a lot of damage here. If they can get far enough to the point where they're attacking the Wardens of Tir and Gorthad in the side, that's going to be bad tidings for them. Whatever happened? They're down here in the behind the hill, taking cover. The most elite Lyndon units. Defeat seems certain for the Mithlon Swordmasters. That must be the result of archers, I would imagine. They may be depleted, but they are attacking units which they are far superior to. Harland infantry, are they shooting? The Harland and Guard certainly still are, and they would certainly be best served going after the Wardens of Tir and Gorthad. Even though they do have that nice armour, they still don't have a shield. That is going to be the most important thing when dealing with arrows from the front. Minsker Rutland archers still got some ammunition left, going after the Mithlon Swordmaster, so both sides here going after the right targets with their archers. But the quality of Lyndon eventually, you'd have to imagine, is probably going to be too much. I mean, now they're sending forward the big guns, the Noldorin Guard, the Blade Masters are also waiting. And a single unit of Lake Town infantry is not going to be enough to hold back the Noldorin Guard. It just won't. Harland and Guard still fighting hard on the front line. More Harland infantry are also on the way forwards. What's happening over on this side? Oof, what happened here? Well, there is a bit of routing going on from the Gondor Spearmen, but this front line is not looking as intimidating as it once was. There's only a few Lake Town pikes left. Are they retreating? Is that what's happening here, Dale? I can't imagine that they dealt that much damage to Dale that quickly with just Gondor Spearmen. Maybe they did. You can see here that Gondor are going to be the ones which are going to be happier about this because they simply have more in reserve, and slowly but surely Dale's numbers are just going to fail them, really. There's still those there. What's going on back here? Nope, just routing units. Isengard is still around here somewhere. Indeed, there are some Uruk-hai archers. Can Isengard win this? The ultimate turnaround from Eclipse 2500. Daily and Royal Guard think about going in. Now, Daily and Royal Guard will make pretty quick work of Gondor spears, but that will also probably tempt more elite forces to be sent forward from Gondor and Umbar, which is probably not ideal from a defensive perspective. Meanwhile, both units of Noldorin Guard are getting in here now, which is bad news for the Lake Town units. There's still arrows flying in over here, but Noldorin Guard are going to be able to stand up to arrow fire better than any other Linden unit with those shields and that armour. Definitely the exception to the rule in the Linden faction. The Harland infantry are going to try and barge their way through again. In 0.96.1, Elven mass as a whole is lower. There will be exceptions to that in 0.97, like Elven pikes will have the same mass, so that they aren't quite so easy to push through. But in 0.96, trying to push through with elves, particularly Linden, is a little bit risky, but you can see here that this flank has collapsed at this point. And once again, I feel as though a little bit's too slow on the uptake here. These Cardland reinforcements, you need to see which way the wind is blowing when you're in a situation like this. And now with fire arrows coming in as well, that's going to wreak havoc on the defenders' morale. Dale and Cardland are always going to be the factions of the ones on display today that we're going to struggle with morale the most, especially seeing as Dale have got their Lake Town units out in force. Here come the Noldorin Blade Masters. It's going to be a disaster pretty soon, I think, for the defenders. Linden are going to flood in. Fire arrows there. The Noldorin Blade Masters may be caught out a little bit here. Maybe pinned in place by the Greenwich Garrison footmen. There's also a unit of Lake Town pikemen on the way over, but they're not going to kill them off nearly in a quick enough fashion. But Linden have pretty much committed everything forward at this point. I mean, other than that unit of archers up on the hill over there, which are shooting their fire arrows in, this is pretty much all Linden have got left. So, it was a bold move by Inarius, but he may be handing the game to Gondor and Umbar. More Dalian forces on the way forward, and, you know, Dale and Cardland up against Linden, they continue to tear chunks out of one another, when the true threat could be over here. You can see here the Dalian Royal Guard are on the front line at this point. There are Gondor spearmen aplenty on the front line, more Gondor infantry coming forward, so the tactics are not really changing. Gondor still content to try and wear the Dalian defence over here down, even with the addition of an elite unit over here. Could have been a good opportunity to send forward some of the stronger Umbar troops. This could be an interesting play, however.
Only half the enemy force remains.
Taking a lot of damage, however, from the Gondor archers. Maybe I am over-egging how many elites Umbar really have left, because they did take quite a lot of damage from Isengard early on. So it might not be quite as cut and dry as I'm making it out to be. But I would certainly feel as though the blue team, as it were, have probably got the upper hand in this fight so far. They can afford to take their time a little bit. Still arrows just flying backwards and forwards. Another unit of Lake Town pikes getting in here. Lake Town bowmen, Gondor infantry, the river patrol are just sort of biding their time. They can't afford to wait too long though. Sekiro shadows die twice. I really need to remember to turn off my Steam notifications when I'm doing this. Lake Town pikemen are moving in much more in terms of reinforcements coming forward as well from Dollar Elf and Lord of Balagost. I suppose they're taking the viewpoint that even if we take a lot of losses, we can at least take Linden down with us. And the Noldorin Blade Masters are in here, in and amongst all of these pikemen. And it's a lot for Linden to cut their way through, you know. Those Noldorin Guard are here in force. They're actually taking range damage, which honestly, if I were Dale, I probably wouldn't bother, just because the Noldering Guard are so resilient to that sort of thing. High armour, good shields. May as well try and go after something else. I would probably go after the Noldering Blade Mass at this point. Try and bring down that Linden General. He's in there somewhere. There's no Wardens of Alos Tyrion from Linden. Just that Harlingen Guard unit in reserve now. The defenders could win this, you know. Just through sheer weight of numbers, they could bring about Linden's doom. But it's still going to be difficult for them. I think, you know, it's this big pocket of Noldering Guard which is the problem. They really don't have anything that can match that in melee at this point, other than maybe the Girions Paladins. But that, you know, the amount of Noldering Guard there are means the Girions Paladins would probably just be overwhelmed. Especially when their only backup would be Lake Town Infantry. Let's see what's happening over here. I'd imagine not a lot of movement on this choke point over here. Indeed there isn't. There's a lot of Gondorians. A lot of Lake Town units as well. The Daily and Royal Guard are still in there, but again, attrition is going to be the problem. The Daily and Royal Guard, they're still very healthy. But over time, you would imagine, damage is just going to pile up, and then eventually they'll be overwhelmed. Lake Town River Patrol, however, this is a good target actually. Purely because it's such a big blob, they'll be able to get a good amount of kills pretty quickly, and it's exactly the sort of thing which can deal quite a lot of morale damage. You can actually see there that the Gondor Spearmen at the heart of this this force over here now shaken. Gondor's morale is going to be stronger here because they're up against Lake Town units, but still, they are just standard infantry. They do not, by far and away, they're not locked morale. We've got over here Lake Town infantry, Greenwatch Garrison footmen pulling out. You can see over here that now they're starting to wrap around. See again, more reinforcements that they just seem to be pulling out of nowhere almost. Which really could have done with being committed sooner. Again, Greenwatch Garrison footmen are really good at holding the line, as long as they're not just asked to do it all on their lonesome, which they may very well be very shortly. I mean, Lake Town Bowmen, Hearthguard of Amon Sul, fair enough, that's a quality unit in melee. But against something like Noldorin Blade Masters or Noldorin Guard, it's not looking so good for this defensive position over here. So I think more and more it's quite clear that Cardland and Dale are not going to be victorious this day. Whatever happened to that Harlingen Guard? Did they just get committed to melee right away? Maybe they did. I mean, this is a healthy unit, which is right here in the middle of things. Still, this Noldorin Guard looking very, very healthy. Killed off a fair few, I suppose. There's a few Noldorin Guard corpses in and amongst that pile, but it's just the sort of thing which Dale and Cardland's armies had no answer for. Really, the Girions Paladins, the crossbows would have been good as well, but they were used early on. And exposed early on as well. Meanwhile, more javelins being put in. That's a good position for the Lake Town River Patrol. Dale, this defensive line still holding. Victory seems certain as well, so the addition of that Daily and Royal Guard on the front line. All important here, a unit of Gondor archers. I think they're out of ammunition. At the very least, they're taking a lot of arrow fire. More javelins coming in. No, this Gondor force at the front line is not looking quite so good anymore. Could it happen? Could Isengard win this? That is the question. Isengard with that unit of Nazkai coming in the late game. What a story that would be. Yeah, these Gondor archers are just being committed forward into melee. Again, not the finest unit. Javelins are pouring in as well. This Gondor force is going to need some pretty substantial reinforcements soon, because you can see already the units which are really depleted as a result of those javelins are starting to rout off and break. And they will not be coming back either. Greenwatch Garrison footmen are routing. The Lake Town Bowmen, I think, are going to retreat. The real question at this point is, do Cardland and Dale retreat all the way? There are the Noldorin Guard. Pushing right through, so yeah, this front line at this point is collapsing. The joint Dale-Cardland effort on this flank is about to fall to the might of Linden. For Linden pikemen, victory is almost a certainty. I mean, there's a lot of Cardland pikes over here. Can't afford to be too complacent with that. And it's good to see the Noldorin Guard are sort of shuffling up round the back over here, trying to surround and destroy this Cardland force once and for all. The half guard of Amon Sul. Obviously, just like most bodyguard spears, very good at sort of tanking damage, but not necessarily the best at dealing damage. Especially not against a foe as skillful as the Noldorin Guard. Over here you can see these pikes, they're surrounded at this point, their phalanx broken. And when they're up close and personal with a unit like the Noldorin Guard, you can always tell it's going to be a pretty nasty time. Noldorin Blade Mass is still looking pretty healthy as well, so you can tell that they weren't really subject to any sort of arrow fire, otherwise they will have taken more losses than they did. Because they went in then. They were quite in and amongst things. You can see where the line broke as well. This section just broke, and then Linden were able to sort of start curling around. Bit of concentration of force there. These Lake Town Bowmen. I'm surprised they're still fighting actually. The Cardland and... Well actually no, I'm not so surprised seeing as the half guard of Amon Sul are here. Good morale buffing units. Let's see what's going on over on this side. This front line's still fighting hard. I think the Daily and Royal Guard actually retreated, which is just going to leave these very basic Lake Town units as a rear guard action. You can see now that Umbar is starting to commit forward some units, and that's going to be enough to rout off some of the Lake Town forces. The Lake Town pikes now all that stands between Gondor and Umbar and getting their own way into the settlement. The Daily and Royal Guard are going to retreat, taking a few losses at this point. They are going to head up to the summit, along with the River Patrol and the Bowmen. I think they're going to link up with the Girian's Paladins as a sort of final stand. What they need to hope for at this point is that Linden go after Gondor and Umbar, and that they tear chunks out of one another, and then that the Girian's Paladins and the Daily and Royal Guard are enough to see them over the line. There's a lot that can still happen in this fight, and we are now into the final 10,000 frames. The final phase of the battle. Again, another unit which maybe would have been useful were the Hearthguard of Amon Sul in that final stand situation. There is only one road up, you know. One road into this this top section. I think that is going to be Cardland's Doom. So they're gone. But yes, there is. There is only one route up here. So Linden and the Southern Numenorians are going to have to contest each other for it, which is good. Right, there are some units over here. The question is, what are they? Are they just routing garbage? No? Yes, they are. Gondor spears. So Isengard is still just sort of biding their time, waiting for their moment to strike. All three, or all four, sides in this conflict can still potentially win this. But who will do so? I don't think Isengard will, to be fair. I mean, I think that it's all over for them. I'm still sticking to my guns and saying Gondor Umbar. Linden, what are they actually doing? Are they going to retreat? Or are they going to try and go right the way around? I don't think they can go right the way around. Actually, no, they can. They can go up and around over here. I don't see necessarily what the point would be, because the conflict is going to happen in this section anyway. As they'll continue to move back, because I think it's about time. Go for a little bit of a fast forward here, because I feel as though this sort of final conflict, this final phase, is going to be decided pretty quickly. If we're in the final 10,000 frames already, and there's still a fairly substantial number of units left alive. Some routing Lake Town pikes over here. Linden already making a quick play, I think, for the summit of the hill. As the Noldorin Guard get into place. One of the Lake Town River Patrol is sort of running to get up to the town centre as well. You can see Dale are doing the right thing. They're trying to retreat as far as they can to bring Gondor into conflict with Linden. What are they doing? It looks like they're not going to go around here after all, which is good, because that would have been a waste of time. So, how does Linden want to approach this? Because they've been very aggressive for trying to take the settlement so far, but will they be as aggressive when they see that if they charge in now, they're just going to be surrounded? As you can see, the Umbar are starting to make their way in, as are Gondor. So we have a look over here. Gondor starting to filter into the settlement now. And you can see that this is when Isengard have revealed themselves, all of those units starting to move from the forest heading towards the town. This is it. The final phase. You know, Umbar and Gondor, they have the most units left, but there's not a huge amount of quality left alive. I mean, they've got some Abrazanim, some Castamir's Legion, Nadu Tariq, a lot of standard units. The quality, I would say, squarely in Lyndon's favour, to be honest. Even Dale have got better quality individually than Gondor and Umbar at this point. And Gondor and Umbar also can't really afford to rest on their laurels too long, because Isengard are coming. Lyndon are on the way as well, so Lyndon making an immediate play for the top of the town. Going to try and take the high ground, and presumably let Isengard do some damage to Umbar and Gondor, and then try and keep it. There is no range units left alive, so Lyndon can afford to set the table as long as they want. Here come the Noldor Guard, so yeah, they're just committing everything forwards. So what do Gondor and Umbar do about that? I mean, I would say they need to charge in now. Ooh. Here we go. The final phase, the first engagement. Daily and Royal Guard are right in and amongst things over here. Unfortunately for them, the Girions Paladins won't be all that useful against everything other than the Noldor Guard. So the Girions Paladins definitely want to be going for the Noldor Guard if they can. That AP will actually find its use there. Lake Town Bowmen and River Patrol will not do very well against these Lyndon forces. Actually routing. That's an interesting development, actually. It must have been the Girions Paladins threatening to flank around them. That was quick. It was a quick break. Gondor starting to move in. Umbar looks like they're staying behind to try and deal with the advance of Isengard. As Dale try to hold on to the town, the Noldor Guard are going to try and avoid the Girions Paladins at this point, and Lyndon doing exactly the right thing. The Noldor Blade Masters going after the Girions Paladins, who are trying to sort of push in as much as they can. Daily and Royal Guard are over here. Again, I would back Lyndon in this fight, just because too much of Dale's defensive force here is made up of units which are very fragile in melee. With the best will in the world. You can see these Harland infantry. They're taking losses. The Girions Paladins doing their best, but I feel as though the quality is just going to be too much from Lyndon, which of course means Gondor need to hurry. I mean, Gondor could be Dale's saving grace here if they get some nice charges with the Gandalf's retinue bodyguard. Some nice hammer and anvil there. So I feel as though Gondor would probably rather face Dale overall. They certainly wouldn't want to face the Girions Paladins, but even so. Meanwhile, Umbar are the ones forming the rear guard as the Uruk-hai archers firing in here, trying to drain Umbar of their remaining ammunition. Umbar will of course have to deal with the Nazkai, seeing as they are the ones that are being tasked with holding Isengard at bay. Now what do the Gandalf's retinue bodyguard do here? Do they charge in and potentially cause Lyndon to be destroyed? Or do they leave it and the overall result of this fight is going to be a Lyndon victory? The Girions Paladins just match up quite poorly with the Noldor Blade Masters as far as elite units go. I mean, obviously they're still both extremely strong, but in terms of the engagement here, the Blade Masters have the better of it. So these Harland infantry are just sort of waiting in the background over here. Well, there goes the Lyndon General. I mean, it is still an elven... It's an elven force, so they probably won't be too concerned about any sort of mass rout. I say that though, those Harland infantry routed far sooner than I thought they would at the sight of the Girions Paladins. Here go the Harland infantry. It may be that Gondor are just sort of content to allow Dale to try and chip away at the strength of Lyndon as much as they possibly can, but I feel as though that's a bit of a mistake. I feel as though Lyndon are the ones you want to kill off more quickly than Dale, I think. Because the Lyndon have got those units of quality which Gondor simply cannot match. Gondor infantry is just going to get mulched by Noldor Guard and Blade Masters. But another rout from the Harland infantry, the lack of a general maybe coming into play a little bit there. And now, a true clusterfuck there at the top of the hill. And there you can see the Uruk-hai crossbows and the Uruk-hai archers trying to get into a position where they can skirmish. The Nadu Tariq chasing them off. Umbar have only really seen conflict against Isengard in this battle so far. Gondor have been the ones to primarily go after Dale. Which makes sense considering the early battle and how that went. As the Gondorians move in here, victory seems certain, defeat seems certain, victory seems certain. So yeah, Lyndon at this point I feel as though this is the end for Lyndon. With the support, well, with the circumstantial support really, of the Gondorian units, Dale may very well be able to hold on, but the Girian's Paladins looking a little bit depleted at this point. They're not really in the sort of numbers anymore that can beat Gondor all on their lonesome. Don't know how many Royal Guard there are left either, only 21. Still, it's more elites than Gondor have been able to muster. There is that cavalry though. Again, Gondor archers that are out of ammo. Gondor spears. There are some Narduzagar heading over here as well. Some more Narduzagars of Umbar starting to filter over more and more to this fight for the hilltop. Here come the Nardu Tariq. They're actually now in melee with the Uruk-hai archers. The Uruk-hai pikemen are moving forward, as are the Nazkai, so I feel as though Eclipse at this point is just going to throw caution to the wind, charge everything in, see what he can accomplish here. Those crossbows very depleted at this point.
Battle seems to be swinging in our favour. From such timings does victory emerge.
Where did that cavalry go? Going to go after Isengard instead? Probably a good move. Need to be careful with the Nazkai, of course, but ever since this became a almost entirely infantry engagement, and yeah, I feel as though at this point, with the numbers, with the positioning, I feel as though my prediction is going to come true, that the Southern Numenorians are going to claim victory today. Girian's Paladins. Who is that? Surely that's not Isengard, they still have the Nazkai. No, it's not. So that must be Cardolan? Or is it Lyndon? It can't be Dale. Yes, it is. It's Lyndon, the Noldorin Blade Masters, broken and fighting to the death. Madness. So, Isengard here, I just don't think they're going to have enough. I mean, the Nazkai are an extremely strong unit, of course, the folk of the ring. There's a lot of Castamir's Legion. The Nairan Arrow Sentinel is going to be able to hold them in place, even with the crossbow support. Umbar have got those archers up on the hill as well, which is going to be a real problem for the Uruk-hai pikemen. Again, Eclipse made a game of it, at least. His role was to die early on in the battle, and he was able to save some units, some strong units as well. But in the end, he isn't going to be able to steal victory away like a thief in the night. All he's really going to be able to do is deal some additional damage to the Umbar forces, which he already dealt a good amount of damage to in the earlier portion of the battle. A little bit difficult to keep track of everything in that engagement with all the trees. Here on the top of the settlement, a much easier engagement to track, as Gondor, their numbers going to be too much for the few remaining Dalian defenders. Lyndon in the end did fall before Dale, so Lyndon were actually the first faction completely destroyed. Well, the first team completely gone, because Cardlin were technically the first individual faction that were dealt with. But Dale at least carried the torch for their team a little bit further into the battle. The Girian's Paladins obviously are going to be able to claim the lives of a few more Gondorians before they ultimately fall. That's those Gondorian cavalrymen. Ah, there they are. So, yeah, the Nazkai defeat seems certain. The Castamir's Legion retreating out of that fight as the Uruk-hai crossbows and the Uruk-hai archers manage to find their way behind the lines, but their reward is merely to be charged by the Gondorian general's bodyguard. And that's going to be enough to rout them off, of course. So again, they managed to get in behind the lines, but it wasn't going to really lead to anything. The Uruk-hai pikemen at this point are routing off. The Nazkai will stand and fight to the bitter end. That's going to be the end of them, I think. The Nazkai and the Girian's Paladins are the two units at this point which are just sort of holding on for dear life. And I feel as though the Girian's Paladins will actually last longer, because they're in pure melee against standard units, whereas the Nazkai are going up against substantially stronger units, and they're also being shot. The Gondor General needs to be a little bit careful though. One stray swing from those large two-handers that the Nazkai use, it could be pretty ugly for him. There goes Gandalf, still alive. Where is the Gondorian General? He must be back here, still stuck in amongst it. He's over here, and he's going to wriggle free. Nazcai's still alive. Who will hang on longer? Well, here come the Abrazani. There are the Girian's Paladins. The Nazkai actually may very well hold on for longer, as Gondor continue to stack the deck here against the Girian's Paladins. More Abrazani moving into play as well. Casimir's Legion. Pushing their way through. I mean, the real engagement is back here. I don't think Isengard are going to have anything returned from Reltone, unless they just want clearer shots for their archers, which understandable. They are running into the cliffside, and this one Nazkai was able to get another kill. And the 8 of them remaining are now into the final stages of this fight. I mean, surely, yeah, the Girions Paladins are going to fall first as the Abrazani move forward. A few more Gondor archers as well, so Umbar and Gondor are going to be victorious. And again, I feel as though the prediction was on point for the most part. Maybe not in exactly the way that I envisioned it, but the ambush did a fair amount of damage to Umbar early on. But in the end, they were able to... The defenders, especially Dale's army, you know, primarily Lake Town units, not a lot of quality there. Things may have been a little bit different if they had a few units of Greenwood Lumbermen, because they may be cheap, lower quality Axemen, but that's still AP that would have been useful against Gondor. And again, there's a lot of maybes and perhaps. These Girions Paladins trapped up against the fences. And surely now they're just hanging on. Very thick armour on the Girions Paladins after all. One of the strongest multiple HP shock units in the game with the AP. Alongside the likes of the Witch Realm Hammer Guard. That's the sort of company they keep. With those big great maces. So I think, what are the Nazkai doing down here?
The enemy army flees the field.
No.
Pursue and run them down.
The Nazkai actually did die in the end, thanks to a rear charge from the Gandalf's Retinue bodyguard. So Isengard fell, which actually means Dale and Cardlin coming in second place. Which overall I think is a pretty good return. And this one Girions Paladin is just refusing to fall. Again, most of the units which are getting hits on him are Spearmen. So that doesn't surprise me too much.
Our cowardly foe runs. It's time to press the attack.
And there we go. Gondor and Isengard victorious. Not a huge amount of their forces left, to be fair. And you can see here the most kills on the field. Lyndon getting a lot of kills on Cardlin, a lot of kills on Dale. Very aggressive, but ultimately not enough to carry them all the way to victory. Umbar had the smallest army, actually, but it was an elite army at that, with the support of those Gondorians as well. Dale and Cardlin had very big armies, but of course, you know, not a huge amount of quality in there. The Cardlin crossbows, the Hearthguard and the Wardens, and then the Girions Paladins, very much sort of very basic armies for them, and as they were sort of in command of the settlement everyone wanted, it was always going to be a rough one for Belagost and for Dollar Elf. And Isengard, they did what they had to. They ambushed, they did a lot of damage to Umbar early on. They tried to sneak a victory by sort of sequestering some of their units in the trees and then bringing them in the late game. But Umbar and Gondor weren't weak enough for that to actually be successful. As far as the Gondorian kills, a lot of kills there on the Gandalf's Retinue bodyguard. Very good use of the Lancers, particularly early on, to sort of go after those Isengard skirmishers which were doing damage during the ambush phase. A lot of units getting over 100 kills as well. A few breaking 200, few units of Gondor infantry, a unit of Gondor spears as well. It's a very standard sort of Gondor army. The Carandor Swordmasters, actually, the two units you would maybe expect to get a little bit more so, mostly were expended during the ambush phase. So, you know, it goes to show that I feel as though a lot of people don't really feel as though Gondor's core is all that strong, considering it's what's meant to be their main sort of focus in a way, sort of their central infantry with their armour and sort of their survivability. But in this situation, I feel as though it demonstrates their strength very well. Going up against more numerous, lower quality units is where Gondor units are going to be at their best, because obviously it's where their survivability shines through the most. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this. Big thank you to Darkwolf for sending this one in. And next up, I think it will be a historical scenario actually sent over by Belagost. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.